sports car had an engine with no pistons, cost as much as a house, and once raced for 84 hours straight at the Nürburgring? That's right. The 1967 Mazda Cosmo Sport wasn't just a car, it was Japan's moonshot on wheels. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the only car in history that sounded like a blender full of bees and still managed to win hearts at Nürburgring. It's sleek, it's rare, it's possibly smarter than your cousin Dave who still believes crypto will bounce back. It's the Mazda Cosmo Sport, the rotary-powered spaceship Japan launched onto the streets in 1967 when Neil Armstrong was still training for the moon. And trust me, this thing looked like it already lived there. Before we dive into the story of Mazda's orbital masterpiece, a heartfelt thank you to all our glorious YouTube sponsors. Yes, you the fine patrons whose monthly donations keep the lights on, the jokes flowing, and the content fact-checked to within an inch of its carburetor. Thanks to you, we don't need to sell NFTs of 3D-printed Trabants. Although, let's be honest, someone out there would probably buy one. Now strap in, because this is the story of how one small Japanese company decided to bet its entire reputation on an untested, unproven engine designed by a German eccentric. What could possibly go wrong? Spoiler, nothing. Because the Cosmo didn't just work, it sang. The Mazda Cosmo Sport, also known as the 110S, was born in 1967 in Hiroshima, Japan. At the time, Mazda, technically Toyo Kogyo Co., was a relatively small automaker with a big ambition to take the radical rotary engine developed by German inventor Felix Wankel and make it not just roadworthy but glorious. A team of 47 engineers, nicknamed the 47 Samurai and led by Kenichi Yamamoto, were tasked with taming the notoriously unreliable rotary beast. After countless trials and enough engineering headaches to make a slide rule cry, they cracked it, developing a carbon-aluminium apex seal that silenced the dreaded nail marks of the devil that plagued early rotary engines. The first prototype shocked audiences at the 1964 Tokyo Motor Show when Mazda's president drove it onto stage. By 1965, 80 pre-production units were built and tested. Full production began on May 30th, 1967, but not in a giant factory. Nope, these babies were mostly hand-built at about one per day. You know your car's special when it's rarer than people who admit they actually read the manual. Styling duties were handed to Heiji Kobayashi, who somehow merged Jaguar E-Type elegance, a Thunderbird's rear flare, and Japanese precision into a coupe that looked like a flying saucer on vacation. The name Cosmo itself was a nod to the era's fascination with space, and it made sense. This thing looked more NASA than Nissan. Mazda didn't flood the streets with these either. Only 1,176 were ever built between 1967 and 1972. The first version, known as Series 1 L10A, had just 343 units. The second, Series 2 L10B, brought a few upgrades and made up the remaining 833. They were all right-hand drive, all sold in Japan, except for a few demo cars sneaked into America by aerospace firm Curtiss-Wright for engine testing. That's right, a car so futuristic it got smuggled in by airplane nerds. And it wasn't just for show. Under the Cosmo's long nose sat a 982cc twin-rotor Wankel rotary engine, known internally as the 10A. That's two rotors at 491cc each. Though rotary math being what it is, the real-world performance was more like a 2.0 liters piston engine. The Series I's 0810 variant made around 110 horsepower at 7,000 revolutions per minute. Not bad, considering it sounded like a swarm of angry dental tools. The Series 2 got the upgraded 0813 version, bumping power to 128 horsepower and torque to 140 Newton-meters. To get there, Mazda gave the 10A 2 spark plugs per combustion chamber, twin distributors, and a 4-barrel Hitachi-built carb that inhaled like a politician in a headwind. All that glorious spinning power was routed through the rear wheels via a 4-speed manual in the Series 1 and a 5-speed manual in the Series 2. Performance? The early model could hit 115 miles per hour, 185 kilometers per hour, while the Series 2 pushed it to about 120 miles per hour. 193 kilometers per hour. Quarter-mile time dropped from 16.4 to 15.8 seconds. The chassis was a steel unibody riding on a 2,200 millimeters, 86.6 inches wheelbase in Series 1, extended to 2,350 millimeters, 92.5 inches in Series 2 for more legroom and less fear of death at high speed. Up front, independent double wishbones with coil springs and an anti-roll bar. In back, a Dadion axle with leaf springs that handled like a charm while staying simple enough for mechanics to grasp after a few sakes. Early cars used unassisted 254 millimeters, front discs and 201 millimeters, rear drums, but Series 2 models added power assistance. Steering was unassisted rack and pinion, pure honest and Arm Day approved. The Series 2 added 15 inches, wheels to replace the 14 inches, set on Series 1, which helped with cooling and stability and made the car look just that much more serious. Dimensionally, the Cosmo was a pocket rocket with a spaceship silhouette. It measured 4.14 meters, 163 inches long, 1.60 meters, 6 inches wide, and just 1.16 meters, 46 inches tall. Curb weight? A trim 940 kilograms, 2,070 pounds, thanks to the lightweight engine and compact dimensions. Inside, it was pure sci-fi, round gauges, a 140 miles per hour speedometer, an 8,000 revolutions per minute tachometer, and leather bucket seats that hugged you like an optimistic ex. But what made this car a proper alien in a world of Fords and Fiats was that Wankel rotary engine. It was so smooth, it could rev to the moon without ever sounding stressed. It was so compact, it allowed for a low center of gravity. And thanks to Japan's tax loopholes, it stayed in the under 1.0 liters class while punching far above its weight, like a sumo wrestler who moonlighted as a ballerina. And while most of the world thought rotary engines would explode faster than a politician's campaign promises, Mazda decided to prove them wrong. They entered 2 Cosmo Sports into the 84-hour Nürburgring Marathon de la Route in 1968. That's right, 84 hours. That's longer than some marriages. One Cosmo finished 4th overall, behind 2 Porsches and a Lancia, proving the engine could take punishment. The sister car retired in the 82nd hour after sliding off due to a rear tire problem. Still a heroic run for Mazda's rotary debut. Now, while the Nürburgring glory gave the Cosmo real credibility, its day-to-day presence remained rarefied. This was no people's car. It cost $1.48 million in 1967, roughly $4,100 at the time, which adjusted for inflation lands in the $30,000 to $40,000 range today. Not quite Ferrari money, but definitely not lunchbox priced either. In fact, the Cosmo was about twice the average annual salary in Japan then, meaning most folks could only admire it through glass or from behind velvet ropes at motor shows. And that rarity only deepened over time. Out of the 1,176 cars built, it's estimated that fewer than 10% survive today. Early engine issues, neglect, and rotary confusion took their toll. You were more likely to spot a unicorn doing taxes than see a Cosmo on the streets. That scarcity has driven modern values into the stratosphere. The most expensive Cosmo ever sold at auction fetched a staggering $264,000 at a 2014 Gooding & Co. Monterey sale. And if you think that was a fluke, think again. A tidy Series 2 Cosmo sold for $110,000 in 2015 at a Bonhams auction. Even average examples today command $60,000 to $100,000, assuming you can find one that hasn't been turned into a drift missile by someone who watches too much Initial D. Design-wise, the Cosmo was something out of a dream sequence in a Bond film. Long hood, short deck, tiny grille, and an impossibly low roofline. The silhouette screamed aerodynamic, even if it had the drag coefficient of a bowling trophy. Cosmo owners, bless them, often described the driving experience as otherworldly. One 1960s road test said it felt more like flying than driving, and that wasn't just marketing fluff. The smoothness of the engine, the linear pull, the way it glided through corners, it really was like piloting a small windowed rocket ship. Well, assuming your rocket ship had Japanese upholstery and only drank high-octane fuel. So where does that leave us today? The Cosmo Sport remains a crown jewel in Mazda's history, a halo car that lit the way for the RX-7, RX-8 and even the Le Mans winning 787B. It showed that engineering doesn't have to follow convention. It can dance around it, spin in circles, and make strange buzzing noises while still winning races. And if you've enjoyed this tale of Rotary wonder, why not subscribe? Join us here at Cool Ideas, where every day we shine a headlamp on the rare, the weird, and the wonderful. May your spark plugs fire true, your rotors spin clean, and your neighbor finally stop revving his Civic at midnight. See you next time.